As a lifelong Pokemon fan, I've always felt that one of the weakest points in the franchise is the storytelling. With the exception of a couple main series titles, I've always come away disappointed by the final results. In most cases, I think the pieces are there for a grand story that can use the elements of the Pokemon world to its full potential, but there's always that missing piece or fear of pulling the trigger. So the point of this video is for me to get my ideas out of my head and see if I'm crazy or maybe some of my ideas are good after all. I'm just going to go ahead and do it in release order because I think one of the biggest flaws in the more modern entries is that Gen 1 through 6 had a pretty solid timeline going on. And then Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire kind of gave up on it for some multiverse stuff, and Game Freak just kind of gave up on the timeline. But I like the idea of the series aging and growing with its audience, and as a result, it just makes sense to go back to Gen 1 and slowly build the universe back up. Admittedly, the one thing I have to my advantage here is that I know what happens later in the series, which Game Freak obviously didn't. So it's easy for me to throw in Easter eggs or build up the universe that they never really intended to get this big. However, for Gens 1 and 2, I'm going to use the remake since those are already tied into Gen 3 and 4. And of course the technical limitations of the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color meant that some of what we were doing in Gen 1 was just impossible. The reason we're starting out with Gen 1 and 2 instead of just Gen 1 is that Gen 1 is pretty perfect in what it sets out to do. It's a simple story of a 10-year-old defeating the Mafia, a tale as old as time. It worked perfectly with the limitations of the Game Boy, but still created this amazing world, and because it was so simple, there's really nothing to fix. At most, I would have kept Giovanni more of a mystery. The first time you meet him, have him battle you from the shadows. Call him Boss Rocket and hide his face. During the rematch in Slivco, after your battle he stumbles into light, and the Slivco owner makes a vague statement like, "Oh, it couldn't be, not him," and then he explains to you that Giovanni is the 8th gym leader, a respected trainer among the people of Kanto. We then hit Cinnabar Mansion. A couple Rocket grunts stand in place of the regular trainers, and after being beat, they make vague reference to destroying evidence. You reach the Mewtwo journals, and there's a throwaway line about Giovanni threatening to cut funding after Mew and Mewtwo escaped. Finally, in the gym battle, he says you've gotten in his way for the last time, and you're properly introduced to gym leader Giovanni. After defeating you, he says he underestimated you, and that he just have to retrieve you to the hard way. This game, you enter Unknown Dungeon and find Giovanni in front of Mewtwo. When you approach him, you get a text box saying Giovanni is unconscious. Once you capture or defeat Mewtwo, Giovanni looks at you, gives you that standard 3 little eclipses text box, and then starts to walk away. He stops, tells Reddy he respects his strength, but the Team Rocket will rise again, and then leaves. I understand if you're against more involvement from Giovanni in the plot. Like I said, the story is really simple and it's pretty perfect just in terms of what it sets out to do. But I like tying things together, and it sets up a lot of what I want to do in Gold and Silver, so it's just the way it is. Ideally for me, the game has forced losses against Giovanni the first 2 times you meet him, but you know, it's Red and he's the GOAT, so it is what it is. Gen 2 is where I make the bigger changes. The beginning is cool up until the Slowpoke tail incident. You make your way through the cave and the Rocket grunts are talking about the return of Team Rocket and how they're selling the tails for funding. Eventually you battle Proton, who says he can't let the boss see him this week and vows to get stronger, and Proton just kind of becomes one of your recurring rivals throughout the story. Afterwards you meet your main rival, Triple Question Marks. After beating him, he says he heard Team Rocket was in the area, but it looks like they've already gone away. He then challenges you to battle, and the story plays out like normal. In Helix Forest, we bump into Farfetch, who leads us to a shrine where an NPC talks about Celebi, the protector of the forest and how it looks out for the region. He says he's not sure if it even exists, but that he likes to believe. The story continues up until you meet Jasmine, who tells you that Pokemon in the region, not just Ampharos, are falling sick, and that she's taking care of Ampharos and can't battle. So you go to retrieve the medicine like usual, and along the way you start hearing about Rage Candy Bars and how they're growing in popularity. You get the medicine to Jasmine and continue the plot as usual until Mahogany Gym. You battle your rival again, and after being defeated he makes some remarks about his Pokemon being weak and complains about losing to you and Lance. You meet Lance and he says he saw you battle Silver and that he would like to ask you for your help. The two of you infiltrate Rocket HQ and turn off the Wave Machine, but a grunt tells you that it's too late and the Mahogany Town base was just a test for a wider attack on Johto. We find out that the Rage Candy Bars that have been distributed throughout the Johto region were just part of the trigger. Lance says he'll continue his investigation and reach out if he finds anything. After beating Price, you get the usual Elm call, and he says to come to his lab immediately. Upon arriving, you'll find Lance and Silver at Elm's lab. Lance informs you that Pokemon across the region are growing sick, and the sicknesses are resulting in forced evolution. He continues that he found Silver sticking in Rocket HQ, and despite his attitude, the two of you are on the same side of things. Then he hands you a Rocket uniform. Lance continues and explains that there's been mysterious radio waves and signals calling out for Boss Rocket to return. Professor Elm's assistant then runs into the room and tells you it's an emergency. We then hear a broadcast of the Oak and Mary show. Professor Oak and Mary are being hijacked live on the air. You then hear Archer telling the boss they surpassed him and no longer need him, and to witness the new peak of Team Rocket. You proceed to infiltrate Goldenrod City and have a series of double battles with Silver. You reach the top of Radio Tower and do a battle with Ariana and Archer. Silver revealing that Ariana is his mom. Ariana makes some remarks about Silver being nothing like his father, and with Team Rocket defeated, Lance takes them away and you shut down the Rocket Wave signals, bringing peace to the region's Pokemon. Silver is clearly disappointed in something, but puts on his best Edgelord face and says the two of you will settle your differences later. With Team Rocket taken care of, you talk to Professor Oak, who asks you a favor. He gives you an item called the GS Ball and asks you to deliver it to Kurt, stating he was going to do it himself, but he's had enough excitement for one day. After delivering the ball to Kurt, he tells you he'll update you on the ball once he figures out the mystery behind it. The game then continues as normal up until the post-game. After beating Elite Four, you wake up in bed and find Professor Elm waiting in the living room. He says that now that you're champion, a friend reached out and has given you a permit to explore and travel Kanto. You arrive in Kanto and find out that Oak sent the permit and wanted to see if you're as strong as Lance claimed. He tells you about the Kanto League and suggests entering. He then gives you a Kanto starter to raise. During your journey through Kanto, you visit familiar locations like Viridian Forest, Safari Zone, Seafoam Islands, and you see the changes that happened in the 3 years since Gen 1. NPCs would explain to you the events that led to these changes, and how many of them resulted in loss or trouble for the region. Each time you reach one of these areas, you'd hear rumors that Boss Rocket was seen in the area after the fall of Team Rocket 3 years ago. Eventually you reach Cinnabar Islands and the ruins of the mansion. After a battle with Blaine in the ruins, Giovanni himself arrives, surprised that anyone would be in the ruins. Blaine acts as if he's seen a ghost and asks Giovanni why he'd come back here after the damage his experiments did to the integrity of the island. Giovanni says it's not really up to him, it's just where fate has led him. Celebi's cry is heard before Giovanni disappears in a bright light. Blaine explains that Team Rocket had a base on Cinnabar Island and that dangerous and powerful Pokemon was born there. After Giovanni's disappearance 3 years ago, his minions started running around and growing more and more chaotic without Giovanni to rein them in. Eventually Team Rocket's remnants would disappear, as without Giovanni, the heat of their action became too much to handle. After leaving Cinnabar, you get a call from Professor Oak, who says the starter has been stolen from his lab and the thief left a note for you. The note says to meet him outside the Kanto entrance to Victory Road. You head to Victory Road and find Silver waiting for you. He explains he had no other way to contact you and just felt you'd always respond to this method. He's heard that Boss Rocket was spotted in the area and wanted your help finding him. Blue shows up to confront Silver and get back Oak's Pokemon. The two battle and Silver loses. Silver prepares to get back to Starter, saying he only wanted to talk to you, but Blue tells him to keep it as he thinks the rematch with Silver could be fun. Blue then looks to you and tells you he'll be waiting in Viridian Gym. You head to Viridian Gym and proceed through the gym as normal, but before reaching Blue, a bright light flashes and Giovanni appears in the gym. He asks why he's been brought here. Blue goes to confront him and the three of you disappear in a white flash, Silver showing up just a second too late. You find yourself in the Viridian Gym, but the layout is different. Blue notes the gym hasn't looked like this in 3 years. You navigate through the gym, the occasional text bubbles popping up to show that the battle is underway. By the time you reach Giovanni, the challenger is gone. Giovanni looks up at you and Blue and says he's not taking challenge at the moment and walks away only for another Giovanni to walk on screen. You and Blue are confused, but Giovanni starts monologuing. He says he remembers this day vividly as the day Team Rocket dies. He explains that this is the day he was defeated by 2 future champions. Blue asks how it's possible that the 3 years in the past, Giovanni explains that he's been bouncing around time for the past few weeks, saying that it started when he heard of Team Rocket's return in Johto. He fully intended to meet with his admins, but he was confronted by a Pokemon named Celebi, and he's been a hostage to his time travel since. The 3 of you are swallowed by another flash of light, and you find yourself outside Viridian Forest. Blue smells smoke and realizes this is the day before the forest was burned down by the remnants of Team Rocket. You, Blue, and Giovanni enter the forest and expose the Team Rocket, Giovanni hiding his identity the entire time. With the forest seemingly saved, Celebi appears before you and sends you back to the present, where Viridian Forest is restored to its full glory, as if it was never gone in the first place. Giovanni says he finally understands and tells you to meet him at Cinnabar Island. You return to the gym and find Silver outside. He asks where Giovanni is and demands you take him to him immediately. Blue says the gym challenge can wait and that the Celebi business is more important. You and Silver travel to Cinnabar Island and meet Giovanni. Giovanni is shocked to see Silver and the two of them sit in silence as a white flash sends you back to Cinnabar Mansion 3 years ago. Giovanni is looking for an excuse to leave immediately and says he's heading to the basement. You make your way through the mansion, battling Team Rocket Runs who seem to be in disbelief, wondering if that was the real Giovanni. You reach the basement where you find Ariana in front of some kind of machine. Giovanni begs her to stop, telling her the damage will be disastrous. She asks why he cares about the damage. Giovanni tells her he doesn't care about the damage, but that he cares about his legacy. She snaps at him and says he's already abandoned Team Rocket, only for Giovanni to inform her he's not talking about Team Rocket. Silver arrives ready to confront Giovanni, but is frozen in his tracks at the sight of his mother. Ariana says none of this makes sense, and attempts to power down the machine, but an error occurs. A mysterious entity emerges from the machine and attacks. You and Silver team up to take down the entity, and with it defeated, the machine power is off. Giovanni tells Silver he's proud of his strength, only for the 3 of you to be flashed away by a bright light. You return to present-day Cinnabar, the island restored to its former glory. Giovanni nowhere in sight. In front of you is Celebi. It dances around you and Silver before flying off. Silver thanks you and says he'll see you around before leaving in search of Giovanni. You return to challenge Blue. After beating him, he says you remind him of an old friend and gives you access to his personal training ground, Mount Silver. Here the story opens up for you to wrap up some storylines. First, Professor Elm calls you saying his lab was broken into again and an egg stolen. Kurt calling you and telling you he's made a breakthrough with the GS ball, and last, a call from Lance, who tells you the league wants to welcome the new champion with some exhibition matches. Blue suggests you take care of all that before you mount Silver, as it'll give you some much needed training for the challenge ahead. Following up on the egg leads you to finding Ariana in New Bark City. She explains that she wasn't sure how else to contact you, but that you always seem to respond to her crimes. After battling her, she gives back the egg and explains that she was hoping you'd have Silver with you. She tells you that she left Team Rocket and that she wasn't aware of how far Archer was going to take things, and that all she was after was calling Giovanni back. She tells you that she could never atone for what she's done, but that maybe she can still leave a positive influence on Silver's life before leaving. You meet with Kurt, who tells you he has solved the GS ball and asks you to take it to the Elix Shrine. You and Kurt go to the forest and place the GS ball in the shrine. A white flash takes you and Kurt to another time. An older Kurt stands before you. "Took you long enough," he says with a laugh before tossing the GS ball back to you as Celebi arrives to challenge you to a battle. Kurt tells you Celebi refuses to be caught in anything but the GS ball. After the battle, future Kurt explains that after meeting you and hearing your time travels, he set out to make sure a ball could capture Celebi and serve as the final test for the greatest myth himself. However, in his attempts to catch Celebi, the ball was lost to time. He explains to himself that opening the ball was just step 1 of his challenge, step 2 was building it, and that he had just witnessed the final step, watching it succeed. You and Kurt return to your present, where Kurt decides it's time to get to work on figuring out how to build the GS ball. Finally, Lance and the Elite Four meet you with the rematch teams. Upon beating them, you open Mount Silver, where you meet your ultimate challenge. I'm done yapping. If you made it this far, let me know what you think, and until next time, peace.